Can I talk about Jesus? Elon Musk's 5-year-old son asked this on live TV, turning a light-hearted interview into something that stunned the world. What he said next silenced the cameras, moved millions to tears, and left even Elon speechless. But the most haunting part? It wasn't what he said, it was what he handed his father. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The studio glowed with soft morning light, a halo of gentle warmth spilling through the wide-set windows and across the polished floor. Cameras were positioned, mics checked, countdowns whispered. Elon Musk sat calmly beneath the glow of studio lights, adjusting the lapel microphone clipped neatly to his jacket. His expression was steady, professional, composed. This was routine for him. He had been interviewed hundreds of times before, but today he wasn't alone. Beside him sat his 5-year-old son X, perched on the plush blue couch. His legs swung just above the floor, tiny shoes tapping the air in rhythm. He wasn't fidgety or shy, just quietly observant, taking in the movement of camera operators, stagehands, and the hum of unseen voices behind the scenes. His small hands rested in his lap, fingers playing with the seams of his pants. A stuffed toy lay hidden behind him, tucked just out of view. Across from them, the host, Sarah Jennings, flashed a practiced smile, her cue cards ready, voice bright. "We're thrilled to welcome Elon Musk and his son X for a special morning segment about fatherhood and future education," she said, as the red recording light blinked on. Elon nodded, relaxed, ready to share lighthearted stories. But before Sarah could launch into the first question, X leaned toward his father and spoke, just loud enough to be heard through his mic. "Can I talk about Jesus?" The room froze. Sarah blinked, visibly caught off guard. Elon glanced down, eyebrows lifting slightly. The studio's quiet hum dissolved into stillness, as if time had briefly paused. This was supposed to be a cheerful 10-minute segment, but in that instant, everything changed. No one expected what came next, not even Elon. X sat up straighter, his voice small but clear, reaching every corner of the studio through the open mic. "People talk about Jesus," he said, looking directly at the camera, "but they don't really listen." A hush fell over the room. Sarah Jennings, usually smooth and unshakable, faltered for a moment. Elon turned toward his son, stunned. This wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't part of any script. But X continued, his voice steady. "He said to love even the people who are mean." Sarah shifted in her seat, trying to regain control of the moment, but no one could look away. Elon's mouth parted slightly. He had no words, just the sight of his son, speaking with the calm intensity of someone twice, maybe 10 times his age. "I tried to forgive," X added, his tone turning softer. "But it's hard. Why would Jesus tell us to do something so hard?" The question landed like a whisper, shouted into the wind. Nothing dramatic, no flash or thunder, just silence. Raw, unfiltered truth, coming from a child who had nothing to gain, no agenda, just a heart full of questions. And with one innocent question, a child silenced a world of noise. Elon Musk had always lived by logic. From the earliest days of PayPal to the launches of Tesla and SpaceX, his world had been one of equations, theories, and controlled outcomes. Failure was a stepping stone, not a mystery. He didn't pray for success, he built it. In his home, science wasn't just valued, it was sacred. AI models ran diagnostics through the night. Bookshelves were lined with astrophysics, not script. There were no crosses on the walls, no quiet prayers before meals. Faith had always seemed like a system without proof, useful for others, but unnecessary for him. But X was different. Even as a toddler, he'd ask questions that reached beyond circuitry and code. Where does love come from, Dad? If we can't see thoughts, how do we know they're real? Elon would do his best to answer, drawing from neuroscience or philosophy, but something in X's eyes always hinted that he was looking for more than facts. One evening, long before the talk show, Elon had sat in his study, remembering a moment from childhood. His mother, a woman of strong intellect and quiet faith, once told him the smartest minds still need something to believe in, something they can't explain away. At the time, he had brushed it off. But now, watching his son speak of forgiveness and Jesus with such simplicity, those words returned like an echo from a canyon he thought he'd left behind. How could he reconcile his world of logic with his son's quiet certainty? He could map Mars, code neural links, and disrupt industries, but he couldn't predict what X would say next, and he couldn't explain why, deep down, a part of him didn't want to. Elon could launch rockets, but could he lift the weight of a... Elon shifted in his seat. He gently cleared his throat, trying to refocus the conversation. Sarah, the learning initiative we're launching next quarter will prioritize problem-solving and emotional intelligence. I think that's where kids really... But X wasn't finished. I gave my sandwich to a man sleeping outside, he said, cutting softly into the space his father had just filled. Elon paused. Sarah blinked. The audience didn't move. Elon turned to him. You did? When was this? X looked down at his lap. Last week. He was cold. I felt bad, so I gave it to him. He paused. But he was still there the next day. I got mad. The sentence hung in the air. Elon's smile wavered. Mad at the man? X shook his head. No, mad at Jesus. Sarah's hand froze in midair, fingers still curled around her cue cards. The control room buzzed, then went quiet. One producer leaned into the mic and whispered, Don't interrupt, let it play. You got mad at Jesus, Elon asked carefully. X nodded. Because I asked him to fix it, to make the man warm, but nothing changed. And then I cried. A hush fell over the studio again. Even Sarah's polished posture softened. She swallowed, trying to find her voice. That's a really honest feeling, she managed, her voice quiet. What happened next? X looked up at the ceiling lights, his small fingers tracing circles on his pants again. I think maybe Jesus wants us to fix things, not just him. That's when Elon looked away, not because he was dismissing the moment, but because something about his son's voice cracked something inside him. It was too much, too real. He had come to the interview expecting a smooth PR appearance, a polished message about education and philanthropy. Not this, but now this. A child saying something no adult would dare. Sarah dabbed her eyes quickly. That's a big idea, X. It's not mine, X said softly. Jesus said it to me, in my chest. In your chest? Elon echoed, his voice barely above a whisper. X nodded. It's how he talks. Not with words, like warm hugs, but inside. Elon's hands were clasped together now, his fingers locked tightly. It wasn't fear that had him so still. It was something deeper. Vulnerability. The kind he didn't show in boardrooms or launches. I just wanted him to fix it all, X whispered again, so nobody would sleep on the sidewalk anymore. Breath caught in Elon's throat. He looked at Sarah, then at the blinking camera light. There was no script for this, no algorithm that could explain what was unfolding. He took a deep breath and said, Sometimes things take time, buddy. Even the things we want to fix most. X nodded slowly. I know, but maybe they'd fix faster if more people helped. Sarah glanced at the control booth. How long are we live? All networks still rolling, a voice replied. Viewership has doubled. Socials are exploding. She turned back to the boy. X, what would you tell someone watching right now? Someone who doesn't believe. X didn't hesitate. I'd tell them Jesus listens. Even if you whisper, even if you cry, and even if you're mad at him. Then he added softly, he still loves you. Silence again. No one moved, no one even breathed. And then came the final sentence, spoken so gently, it felt like a prayer. Maybe Jesus wants us to help fix things. The studio lights hummed above them, but Elon Musk wasn't thinking about the cameras anymore. He wasn't thinking about PR, headlines, or how this moment might ripple through his company. He was thinking about his son and the growing quiet inside himself. X's words still echoed in the air. Maybe Jesus wants us to help fix things. Elon glanced at the boy sitting beside him, so small, yet somehow speaking truths that no analyst or executive had ever dared to ask him. Not in those terms, not like this. Sarah cleared her throat gently. X, do you think Jesus is proud of you? X looked down, thinking. I don't know, but I think he's glad when I try. Then, as if prompted by something deeper than the conversation, X turned toward his father. Daddy, he asked softly, does Jesus like rich people? The question landed with weight. Elon froze. A small murmur from the audience, the crew, even Sarah. She didn't interrupt. No one dared. X continued. He said it's hard for them to go to heaven. For a long moment, Elon said nothing. His mind raced through scripture he barely remembered, articles he had skimmed, interviews he'd avoided. He had spent his life in pursuit of innovation, wealth, and global change, but here, his son was asking something no shareholder would ever voice. At last, he leaned forward and spoke quietly. Not if we love people more than money. X nodded slowly, absorbing the answer with the same solemnity he had offered the question. Then we should give more. The sentence was simple, innocent, but in that moment, it was heard around the world. In the control room, the head producer whispered, "Mark that. That's the clip." On set, Elon exhaled through his nose. Not relief, realization, a deep, shifting awareness that perhaps, somewhere along the way, he'd stopped asking himself that very question. Did he love people more than what he had built? More than his titles? More than the safety that success had bought? Sarah's voice broke the silence, tentative. What would giving more look like, X? The boy tilted his head. Blankets, sandwiches, hugs, time, smiles, money too, but not just money. Elon glanced at his son again. The words weren't complex. They didn't need to be. What made them powerful was their purity, the unfiltered sincerity that Elon hadn't felt in years. In the past, he had dismissed such sentiments as childish, idealistic. Now, they were chiseling through the protective walls he'd built around himself. Technology, data, strategy. These were the tools he'd used to change the world, but they had also become shields. And his son, this small child with wide eyes and a steady voice, had just walked through them as if they weren't there. Do you ever feel scared? Sarah asked gently, turning to X. Sometimes, he said. But when I say Jesus' name, it's like a warm thing in my chest. The words made Elon look away again, jaw tight. He wasn't sure what he was feeling, only that it wasn't anything he could engineer, fix, or understand. A moment later, X leaned over and took his father's hand. Daddy, I think Jesus likes when you help people, even with rockets. Elon gave the faintest smile. Thank you, buddy. And then the boy, without cue or hesitation, looked into the camera and said, Then we should give more. The line traveled like lightning. Within seconds, it lit up social media feeds, sparked hashtags, and rewrote headlines. But inside the studio, it wasn't noise that followed. It was silence, the kind that settles in when something holy has just been said. Backstage, the lights were dimmer. The cameras had stopped rolling, but the weight of what had just happened hung thick in the air. Elon sat in a quiet corner of the green room, his arms gently wrapped around his son. X leaned into his side, resting his head against his father's chest. For the first time in a long while, Elon wasn't the billionaire visionary, the mind behind Mars missions or satellite networks. He was simply a dad, and right now, that was more than enough. Elon's hand moved slowly along his son's back. "You okay, buddy?" he asked softly. X nodded, eyes still wide from the moment on set. "I wasn't scared." "I know," Elon whispered. "You were brave." X looked up. "Jesus says, when I talk to him, I feel warm in my chest. Like your hug." Elon blinked quickly, staring at the far wall to keep the emotion from spilling over. The words struck deeper than he expected. Warmth, presence, the simplicity of that connection. It felt so distant from the complex systems he lived inside every day. Sarah Jennings walked quietly into the room, giving them a gentle smile. "That was powerful," she said softly. "I don't think we'll ever have a show like that again." Elon managed a faint smile. "Neither will I." She took a seat across from them, folding her hands. "It's rare to see you speechless, and I mean that kindly." Elon looked down at his son, who was now toying with the edge of his shirt, humming something only he could hear. "I've spent my whole life building things," Elon said slowly. "Systems, structures, technology that outlives the present moment. But maybe, the thing I'm building, the thing that really matters, is sitting right next to me." Sarah's eyes softened. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. X looked up again. "Daddy, is it okay if I said too much?" Elon shook his head, pulling his son closer. "You said exactly what needed to be said." There was a pause, a stillness. Then X added quietly, "Being smart is good, but being kind is better." The words hovered like smoke in the room. Elon leaned his head back against the wall, his breath catching in his throat. All the logic, all the planning, all the structures he'd spent decades perfecting, none of them prepared him for this moment. His son wasn't quoting textbooks or engineering specs. He was speaking from something deeper, something Elon had long forgotten how to access. And now, in the simplest of phrases, it returned. Sarah leaned forward, voice almost a whisper. "Do you think you'll talk about this publicly?" "I don't know," Elon replied. "This feels too sacred to turn into a headline." He glanced down at X, who had drifted into a quiet hum again, fingers drawing invisible shapes in the air. And for once, Elon didn't have a response. No press release, no clever quip, no master plan. Just a tear, soft and slow, tracing down the side of his face. It wasn't sadness, it wasn't fear. It was surrender, a release. The recognition that sometimes truth doesn't come in equations or engines, but in a child's quiet voice, reminding you that kindness still matters more than conquest. And in that moment, Elon Musk, the man known for defying gravity, was finally grounded. Back on the stage, the lights had dimmed slightly. The show had technically ended, but no one was moving. It was as if the room itself was holding its breath. Crew members hovered just off camera, uncertain whether to begin cleanup or simply stay still and observe whatever sacred thing was happening. Then, quietly, one of the crew, a woman in jeans and a headset, stepped forward from the shadows. She didn't say anything. She simply reached into her bag and placed a small wooden cross on the edge of the stage. It was simple, smooth, hand-carved. No one had planned it. No one had told her to do it. It was just something she carried, and something told her now was the time. X saw it immediately. Without a word, he stood, walked across the stage with small, deliberate steps, and picked up the cross in both hands. It looked almost too big for him, the wood stretching wide in his grip. He turned back toward his father, held the cross out, and said softly, "This might fix you." Elon didn't speak. His hands trembled slightly as he reached out and accepted the cross from his son. He looked down at the worn wood, then up into his son's eyes. "Why are you giving this to me, buddy?" he asked, voice low and unsteady. X shrugged lightly, not with carelessness, but with that deep childlike wisdom that didn't need to over-explain. "Because you fix things, Daddy. But this might fix you." The silence was overwhelming. Sarah stood off to the side, tears shining in her eyes. No cue cards, no script, just reverence. X took a step closer, still looking at his father. "Jesus doesn't want us to be perfect," he said. "Just honest, just soft." Elon closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, something had shifted. Not in the lights, not in the room, but in him. "Thank you, buddy," he whispered. X nodded and climbed back onto the couch, legs swinging again as if nothing had happened. But everything had. The crew stood frozen. In living rooms across the world, people wept quietly. Some clutched their hearts, some folded hands in prayer, some simply sat still, unable to explain why tears were falling or why their chests felt warm for the first time in years. Because this wasn't a performance. The boy wasn't preaching. He wasn't lecturing. He wasn't trying to teach. He was just telling the truth. And the world was finally quiet enough to listen. The studio didn't empty all at once. It happened slowly, like the end of a long prayer. No one wanted to be the first to speak, the first to move. Even after the cameras powered down and the microphones clicked off, people lingered. Some hugged. Others simply sat still. The small wooden cross remained on the edge of the stage, untouched. When Elon and X stepped out into the hallway, there was no press scrum, no flood of noise, just quiet, reverent quiet. The car ride home was silent too. No music, no scrolling through emails, no small talk. Just the faint hum of the road and the steady breathing of father and son sitting side by side. At home, the evening unfolded gently. A warm meal was shared at the kitchen table, simple and unspoken. X ate slowly, peacefully, as if nothing extraordinary had happened, though the entire world was still reeling from his words. Elon watched him with different eyes, no longer just curious about what his son might become, but grateful for who he already was. Later that night, Elon sat at the edge of X's bed. The lights were low and the house was still. X was curled beneath his blanket, holding his favorite stuffed animal close to his chest. "Daddy?" he whispered softly. Elon leaned closer. "Yes, buddy." X blinked up at him, his voice quiet but sure. "Do you think Jesus has toys in heaven?" Elon smiled gently, a warmth blooming in his chest. He brushed a lock of hair from his son's forehead. "I think," he said slowly, "he has everything that makes kids smile." X nodded, his eyelids growing heavier. "Okay," he whispered. Then, just before drifting off, he added, "Then I'm not scared to go there someday." Elon stayed seated long after X had fallen asleep. He didn't check his phone. He didn't review news headlines or reply to waiting emails. He just sat there, holding on to the stillness, holding on to the weight and wonder of a day that had changed everything. And for the first time in a long time, he felt at peace. The next morning, Elon sat alone in his study, the house still quiet, the world outside still buzzing. On his desk, The small wooden cross rested beside his favorite sketch pad. He reached for his journal and opened it slowly. In a steady hand, he wrote, "What fixed me wasn't a solution. It was a child's question." Beside the journal lay a folded sheet of paper. X's drawing from the night before. It showed Jesus holding a bright red heart in one hand and a rocket ship in the other. At the bottom, in crooked block letters, it read, "He likes your rockets, Dad." Elon placed the picture in a frame and set it next to the cross, right where he could see it every day. No graphs, no data. Just a reminder of something deeper, something softer. And in that quiet space, he smiled. Not as an innovator or a billionaire, but as a father who had finally begun to understand. If this story softened your heart, hold on to that feeling. Maybe that's where the healing begins. Subscribe for more inspiring stories about love, faith, and the moments that change everything. Because what if kindness, not brilliance, is the legacy we need most?